There's a helpful analogy in the Old Testament from this with Pharaoh. Remember, God, he calls Moses to go to Pharaoh to let his people go, but of course Pharaoh is like, no, I'm not going to let your people go. And as you read that story with the plagues, there's this interchange. Sometimes it says Pharaoh hardens his heart. Sometimes God hardens Pharaoh's heart. Sometimes it just doesn't even specify. It just says his heart is hard. Pharaoh, of course, believes himself to be God. He's clearly bad from the beginning. He kills the children of Israel, the male children, to exert his authority for his own economic gain and greed. And Pharaoh would not let the people go. Now, throughout these plagues, there's times when Pharaoh actually gets a legitimate choice. Hey, Pharaoh, will you respond now, finally? After all these frogs, will you let the people go? After all this hail, will you let the people go? And sometimes it gets so bad that Pharaoh is overwhelmed and he says, okay, uncle, go. And he lets the people of Israel go. But after the plagues stop, you know what God does? God hardens Pharaoh's heart so that he reneges on his words and he changes his mind and says, nope, just kidding, you can't go. Now why? Why does God do that? Because God knew that Pharaoh's change of heart was not out of a legitimate fear and reverence of Almighty God. Sure, Pharaoh wanted to let the people go, but it's not because he somehow now is realizing that God is the one true God and he fears God. He's letting them go because these plagues are miserable. But he didn't recognize God's kingship. And God, who's always doing a million things at once, was doing something in the life of Israel and Egypt for generations to come. Look at Exodus 14:4. God says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. And this is talking about the Red Sea. He will pursue them, and I will get the glory over Pharaoh and all his hosts. And watch this. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. And they did so. You see, the Lord was not just interested in setting his chosen people Israel free, although that's one of the things that God was doing. But God wanted to establish his reputation among the nations so that all might know who God is. And we know by the time Israel gets to the Promised Land, the people of the Promised Land are quivering in fear because they know, man, their God, did you hear what he did to the Egyptians? And as a result, some of the people of the Promised Land actually join Israel. Remember Rahab? Hey, we heard what you guys did to the Egyptians. We're joining your team. Okay? And not only that, the theology of the Exodus became the bedrock of who God is for Israel throughout generation to generation. It even led to the salvation of some of the Egyptians. Exodus 12 tells us that when Israel left, look who came with them. A mixed multitude also went up with Israel, and very much livestock, both flocks and herds. I mean, there were some Egyptians who wised up. Like, Pharaoh, you can keep worshiping Osiris and Ra and the god that looks like a falcon, but we're getting out of here, okay? We've seen enough, okay? No more death for me. I'm going with these guys, and I'm serving their God. You see, sometimes God hardens and dulls the heart of a rebellious people because he has other purposes he's attempting to accomplish through their life. The people had their choice. Pharaoh had his choice. And as Pharaoh hardened his heart, God gave him over to a hard heart and continued to harden his heart to have greater purposes accomplished.